Do you need drawing skills to be a successful graphic designer? That's coming up next. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Aaron Rutten, and it is my mission to help creative folks like you be more successful at what you do. If you want to get access to all of my graphic design tips, click that subscribe button now. Today I'll be answering a question from one of my viewers. Mutangana wants to know, do I have to know how to design by hand to be a graphic designer? To answer that question, it really depends on the kind of design that you're doing. If you're going to be creating a lot of illustrations that are photorealistic, then it would be beneficial to have a strong background in illustration. However, if you're just drawing simple icons, logos, and cartoons, then you might not require as much illustration training to get the job done. For example, designs that are created for logos, icons, and graphics tend to be very simplified. Typically, these graphics are assembled from shape tools in vector format, which does not require as steady of a hand and as much muscle memory as freehand drawing would. Nevertheless, it does require a strong sense of creativity and an understanding of art and design aesthetics. If you don't know what looks good and is also effective as a design, then it doesn't matter how well you can draw freehand. If I were to rank the importance of a few of the core skills the average graphic designer needs, it would look something like this. Number 1, technology/software proficiency. You have to know how to use the software, otherwise you're not going to get any jobs. If you can't use Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape or any vector art application at all, you're probably not going to get those kind of jobs. Number 2, color theory. You have to know how to use colors, because if you just pick ugly colors, people aren't going to like your designs. Color is very important. It's one of the most important aspects of a design. Number 3 is typography. You have to know how to use fonts. If you don't know how to use fonts, then your designs are going to look ugly and amateurish, and people are not going to want to hire you. With some exceptions, that's why I ranked it a little bit lower. I'm not sure I like the font choices of every major brand out there. Number 4 is design principles. You have to know the principles of what you're designing. Why does a logo look a certain way? Why does a brochure look a certain way? If you don't know that kind of stuff, then it's going to be very, very hard to satisfy your clients. Number 5 is creativity, and that might offend some of you creative folks out there, but all I'm really saying by putting creativity a little bit lower is that even if you're a very, very creative person and you have a lot of great ideas, if you can't use software and you can't use typography or color and you don't know the design principles, then it doesn't do you any good to have these great creative ideas. So creativity is very important, but it's not the most important skill you need to be a successful graphic designer. Number 6 is self-promotion. You have to be able to promote yourself in order for your clients to be able to find your business and hire you. So it doesn't matter how well you know the software and how creative you are and how good you are at typography and color. If people aren't able to find your website, they're not going to hire you and you're not going to make any money. Number 7 is communication skills. You have to be able to talk to the client to get the job. You have to be able to understand what they're asking for. You have to be able to communicate your expectations. You have to be able to exchange feedback along the way so that the design is going in the right direction and the right kind of revisions are being made. You have to be able to deal with difficult clients. You have to be able to negotiate. There's a whole lot of communication skills that are very important. Number 8 would be marketing/advertising best practices. You can design a brochure as a brochure should be designed using a template, but if you don't have at least some insight into what makes a brochure stand out or what appeals to people to get people to grab the brochure, then your designs are not going to stand out and your clients are not going to be as happy. So you should at least have some idea of that stuff, but it's not the most important skill to have. And then number 9, illustration skills. Really? Number 9? Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Illustration skills can be important. They're definitely very, very useful for graphic designers, but they're not essential. You can be a graphic designer without being able to draw at all, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And then finally, number 10 is time management. You have to be able to manage your time because often you're going to be juggling more than one graphic design project. You're probably going to be juggling like 10 at a time. So you need to be able to manage time for this client, that client, the other client, and then have some time for yourself and make sure that you're able to get all the jobs done. All right, so I know that you're surprised that I ranked illustration skills so low, but let's consider this example. How much illustration skill did it take to create the Target logo? It's a couple of rings and a dot. 0. But the other 9 core skills that I listed were utilized. So as you can see, illustration skills can be important, but they aren't as important as some of the other skills you'll need to know to be a successful designer. And in cases such as the Target logo, what you're designing might not require any drawing skills at all. It's actually quite common to run across designers who cannot draw. I'm sure there's lots of reasons for this, but I'd say it's primarily because it takes a lot of skill and dedication to be good at both design and illustration. If you are primarily a designer, then you tend to dedicate all of your time to learning design and you don't put too much emphasis on learning illustration. And if you're primarily an illustrator, then it might feel kind of odd to draw using shape tools rather than a pencil. Illustration and design do overlap in many aspects, but they are two very different ways of creating and utilizing imagery. Typically, if you're good at one of these two skills, it can certainly help you master the other, but not everyone has the mind for being both a designer and an artist. Another reason why designers are able to be successful without having strong illustration skills is because it's convenient to use stock images when you need artwork. And that's much more cost-effective for the client compared to commissioning and possibly even licensing custom artwork from you in addition to the fee for your design services. And when a stock image doesn't cut it, you can always trace over a reference image to create a graphic. So it is possible to be a successful graphic designer without ever having to draw anything freehand. And let me say that there's nothing wrong with either of those options. It's been necessary for me to use stock art in my designs, and I've had to trace images rather than freehand draw them because the client didn't want to pay me 10 times more to complete their design. But stock images and tracing can only get you so far. Eventually, you'll run into jobs where you need to draw something freehand, or at least partially freehand. And if you can't do it, then you have to turn that job down, and it goes to someone else who can draw freehand. So the point here is, if you have those additional illustration skills to offer, you'll have a major advantage over your competition. I don't know how many times my clients commented on how unusual it was for me to have both design and illustration skills. But at the same time, if you're primarily a designer and not an illustrator, then you don't need to overdo it. Overly intricate artwork is nice to look at, but it's not as effective as a simple and elegant design can be. I think what's important is to avoid feeling like you have to master drawing to be a successful designer, but you should have at least some fundamental knowledge of illustration in case you ever need it, which you likely will. However, you certainly can get by just fine without ever having to freehand draw a thing. Now, in my opinion, it's best not to create reasons why you can't do something. You'll be more successful if you focus on why you can be a graphic designer. So I'd say give graphic design a try, and if you feel like you're struggling to get the illustration quality that you'd like, dedicate some time to learning about illustration and practice that on the side. A great way to do that is to check out some of my free digital art tutorials on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link to those down in the video description. So there you go, those are my thoughts on how important it is for graphic designers to have drawing skills. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, and if you'd like to join me on my mission to create more free educational videos for YouTube, check out patreon.com/AaronRutten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.